to discuss open records because I know this is a major pain point for doing investigative work, and it's complicated and it can get frustrating, and it can be tough out there, but it is also very, very crucial for doing this kind of work and doing watchdog work. So please ask all your questions. I'm not a lawyer, but I've written a lot of records requests and filed a lot of appeals, and can hopefully talk through some of the issues that you guys are having, and we can also hopefully maybe workshop some ideas that you have and use some examples of records you would like to get to talk about how would we get those. So let me start by asking this, because I know we have a wide variety of experience in the room, from students through professional. How many people have filed a state public records request for you? You have filed one before. Okay. Seems like a little more than half? Okay, that's great. What about a federal records request? How many have filed those?
Filed or actually received information?
That was actually my next question. Of you guys who have filed a federal request, how many of you got your information?
Maybe twice.
Yeah, like
Happily redacted, but.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah,
2
it's
years later.
federal records requests. So for those who have never used public records, there's two major systems, or really 51, I suppose, if you think about it, because there's the federal system, that's the Freedom of Information Act, right? And so I'll use the term FOIA a lot to just stand for like any public records request. And then each state has their own laws as well. And so we're gonna talk mostly about the state level actually, because that's the one that reporters use most often, because that covers all of your local schools and governments in the state and everything. And also, the federal system is just so devastatingly broken that I'm kind of shocked that as many of you got information that did. Because it's very, very, there's huge backlogs, there's non-transparent people and cultures and administrations, and so the federal system is tough, but ask questions about either one as we go through this. Yeah?
So to resave, you have to
So you need to, you need to bring it in. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I think they're gonna have to move that table.
Yeah, no.
Did you go down the rabbit hole?
I went down the rabbit
But also, like, don't live in my head. Because they just.
I'm not judging him. I mean, I'm kind of.
No, I'm glad you said it. And then keep it.
You do. It's a really good.
Thought experiment.
Any of you excited stories?
Yeah.
True.
She's going.
That's a key.
Yeah.
I am, yes, and that was. I just think it's really interesting because they are pretty. It's like.
Really?
3 years ago. Whatever.
Yeah.
It was full time.
But like, but this is one of the more examples of it being like really on the cusp of like which way to
No,
go.
it's good.
Because like it's not like coming from a really horrible place.
Fort Myers News Press, which is where I was opposing to and from.
Like the Charlotte Observer is terrible.
Does the Washington Post, do they have a culture where if you're in
All right, so is it okay if I just
Like, do they hire
keep going? You guys do what you need to do.
okay,
So
Yeah, okay.
I think we should. You guys are gonna convince me.
Okay, so let's keep going, and we're still working on the projector situation. So sorry for the disruption with that, but we'll keep going because we have things to talk about here. So if everybody gets in the prying loose public records presentation, we can flip through this together. The number one thing going into any of this work is knowing the law and knowing it really, really well. So if you're going to be doing a lot of Georgia records requests that you're reporting here, read that law and know it cold. Study every provision in it, study all of the exemptions in it, because so many times, oh yay, look, hooray, thank you guys. So my screen will come back up here in a second, and we can look at the Attorney General's resources on this. How many of you have read the law? Or like at least most of it? You guys? I mean, it's pretty long, and it's a law, so it's written by lawyers and legalese and all that, but it's really, really informative to read it and to be able to refer back to it a lot. And your Attorney General's office has some good resources, plus it has the law written there so that you can read the full law. Right here, the Open Records Act. I would also highly recommend reading this guide from the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. They are an amazing resource for help with public records. And I'm going to mention them several times, and I'm a huge fan. But they happen to have, they just redid this Open Government Guide, and it's kind of a standardized guide to every state. So you can also go in if you have to put in a request in Alabama or wherever, if you're looking for information. You can come here and find out what you need to know quickly. Like, what does that law say about data? Or who can make requests? Like, for example, in Arkansas these days, they made it a new provision in their law that you have to be an Arkansas resident. So we actually help connect people all the time to file requests in Arkansas. We have volunteers to do that. So this site is really handy to bookmark. It helps you know the law. So as we talked about the two systems, federal and states, there is a link there for the federal law if you want to consult that. It really covers only executive branch agencies is the catch here for the federal law. So you can file requests with the Department of Education and Department of the Interior. Probably not them though, they recently said they're not even going to follow the law. Department of Energy, that kind of thing. Does not cover the courts. Those are under a different law, and that's where PACER gives you access. Does not cover Congress. Cannot file a FOIA for anything dealing with them. And it does not cover the White House, unfortunately. It would be super awesome. The people who write the laws always exempt themselves, seems like. The state level covers state agencies and the lower agencies, anything that receives taxpayer money, essentially. Because that's the reason for these laws, right? They give the taxpayers access to information of what is done with their money. And so each state is a little different, but here in Georgia, it covers state and local agencies, but not the legislature again, and not the courts. Those are governed under different access laws. And one thing I did like in your law is that it covers things like municipal government membership organizations, for example. If there's like the Georgia Mayor's Association that gets taxpayer money, it's covered as well. So there's some extra agencies in there. But this all covers also, school districts, police departments, public universities, any agency you can think of that receives taxpayer money. Yes?
Where would military fall?
Well, federal. Yeah, unfortunately. And it's so hard to get information out of them too. So much of your experience will depend on the actual agency that you go to. And some of them are just worse than others. I don't know of any that are like spectacular, especially at the federal level. But yeah, you have to think of like what level of government is it and where they receive their funding essentially. And that will tell you what law governs what agency. I really like to also give this perspective about the laws in general and transparency in our country because it's not pretty in a lot of places. The Center for Public Integrity did this project. They do it every 10 years or so to look at transparency and corruption and things like that across the states. And this is their chart where there's 2 that got a C, and literally everyone else is below that. And Georgia's a D-, but hey, you got 24th place with a D-. That's pretty good. And they have a whole interactive that's linked here if you want to go read about transparency in the states. And the letter of the law is awesome. Like, you guys have a law that's really written strongly to give good access to information. And it says things like, the General Assembly declares that the strong public policy of the state is in favor of open government. And it has this like really great declaration. And so that's the letter of the law. And then there's in practice, right, of how it actually works in real life. And your mileage varies depending even on the person who is handling your request and the culture of that agency and many different factors that a lot of times the law is not followed. And I'm so glad to be here in Atlanta because Atlanta has the distinction of being a 2-time finalist and 1-time winner of the IRE Golden Padlock Award, which is this lovely statuette thing here that is awarded to the most secretive government agency in the United States every year. We always invite them to come and accept their award. No one has yet. And Atlanta is the first one to show up on our list twice. So in 2017, this is the craziest, both of them are the craziest, basically. But this was when the Mayor Reed released like piles and piles, like millions of documents, like everything that included, what was this, like this Mitchell Street where City Hall is located. Was anyone involved in that? I remember when reporters were just like scrambling. It had to be
They
crazy.
printed them out like that big, like Excel sheets were that were that big, and then they just stacked them in boxes.
With lots of
1.5.
empty, like thousands of empty sheets in between.
Oh
my God.
1.5 million pages? Is that what it was?
Interesting.
And then they kicked him out after a while. They told him like, oh, we're closing the doors. Like, come back tomorrow.
Oh my God. And so, yeah, there was just like one room and everyone's like scrambling, crawling through paper. So it's wild. And it's like, we're being transparent, we're releasing everything, but they're burying you. And that was only a finalist that year, by the way. I don't remember what won in 2017. But hey, 2018, our latest one, Atlanta won for several different things. But this, I use this as an example all the time actually because people do ask me like, well, how do you trust the information that you're getting? I'm like, well, it's government information, but this is a case where Atlanta actually made up false documents to give in response to a request, which is just bonkers and crazy, and they're being prosecuted for some of this stuff. There was also a case where some reporters got text messages about their request and they were directing their staff to be as unhelpful as possible, drag this out as long as possible, and provide information in the most confusing format available. They're just being like straight up, like trying to hide things. It's just crazy. And so you guys have such a great law, and it's like we aspire to this great transparency, and it's just, depending on where you are, what happens. So, but I don't want to discourage anyone. Everyone should always try. Reporters should use these laws all the time, constantly. And these laws are made for the public, right? Anyone can use them, but journalists use them most often, and we're really kind of the front lines of transparency. So what is open? Records of any kind in any format that are created by these agencies that are the defined governmental bodies in the law. And any form, so like video, audio, data, electronic data, paper, obviously, emails, all of that is open. As long as, as long as it's not subject to one of the exemptions under the law, of which there are many, and we'll talk about some of them. But things that are clearly open is like budget information, like where your money is being allocated, meeting agendas, public salaries, discipline records even of public employees, and like police incident reports, not the full investigation necessarily, but the incident report. Those kinds of things are super duper open. We will talk about the exact wording to put in requests as well. The overview of the procedure here. Your state law actually allows for you to just walk in and give a request like in person, just stating a request orally, highly, highly recommend you don't do that, so I scratched it out on here, saying it's possible. But you always want to have a paper trail, so you always want to do a written request to a custodian, the proper custodian of the records. You have to find out who that is. And the law gives them a reasonable amount of time to respond. And like the limit is 3 business days. I'm sure every public agency says, I have 3 business days, right? But really it says you have a reasonable amount of time, which in many cases should be less than 3 days. And if they need more time, like it's in storage or whatever, for whatever reason, they must provide you a timeline. This is the worst part of your law, is that there's no administrative appeal process. If you are denied, there is this mediation office, but there's really no great appeal process, and you a lot of times have to take it to court. So the details we're going to go through here. We're going to talk about, before the request, doing your homework to find out what's available so you can write the best possible request and get what you want. We're going to talk about being very specific when you write the request and exactly how it should look and go. And then we're going to talk about how to follow up after requests. Any questions up until this point? Okay, so doing your homework. My favorite first stop when I am thinking about any records is actually not Google, although it's maybe my second stop. Is the record retention schedule is my first stop. Has anyone used one of these? No? Okay, great. So the record retention schedule is actually a state law that, or a state policy, I should say, I guess, that lists every single record, the name of it, and how long they have to keep it. And there's different retention schedules for state level agencies, for local governments. The federal government kind of has their own system of this. But if you're looking for anything, I just Googled Georgia record retention schedules, and it takes you straight to the state archives, and this page is for local government specifically. And there's different categories here. So let's look at planning and zoning and what records they have to keep. So this is what a retention schedule looks like, and it is, I actually really like this one. It's very specific. They have little codes. So document LG 17001 is planning studies and reports, and they have to keep it for 10 years. These are basically studies completed by outside consultants and or city planners. So you can go in and you know they have to keep the last 10 years worth of studies, for example. And residential blueprints, whatever it is that they keep. This is their policy. And there's different retention schedules for universities and for various different types of agencies. So you can go in and see what they have. Now, there could be exemptions also, right? It doesn't mean you can have all of them. Like, especially for universities, there's FERPA, where it protects students' personal information. But at least you know it's there, and it's like, I like to think of it, it's like a menu of public records that you can order off of, and you can know exactly what it's called. You can use their terminology. It's like a guide for you to look at. Questions about record retention schedules? They're super cool and handy. Highly recommend.
So what if there's one on there that they're supposed to keep? I was just looking at the autopsy report, it's for life. There, I had a coroner recently say that the old guy lost it, he was the old coroner. So like, what do you do? What is your, there's just, it does not exist.
I mean, it can be a story. It depends on how big a deal you want to make out of lost autopsies, I guess. But in that case, it's like, he lost, how many did he lose, you know?
Well, I only know the one because that's the only one I asked for, but yeah, I mean, it could be.
If there was really terrible record keeping and they're like not really following it, if it's a problem, then it could be a story, you know? The old coroner lost half of the autopsy reports or whatever.
I've been having issues with the Cobb Sheriff's Office keeping files open so that they don't have to release them. Is there anything, and just generally they're very uncooperative, they drag things out, they charge me too much money, and it's very hard to challenge that without going to court. Do you have any advice about,
So, yeah, so the exemption we're talking about here is open police investigations are exempt from disclosure, and they're exempt as long as they're quote unquote open, right? So they can keep a cold case open for 30 years and they don't have to give you anything. I mean, it's a discretionary exemption, like they could give it to you, but this is where it's like the person on the other end is such an important piece of this, and taking them to court is really your only recourse in this state, to be honest, and arguing like there's nothing happening in this case. It's closed for all intents and purposes, and it should be open if they're not playing ball with you. I don't know, does anyone have experience with that here in Georgia, that they've had success?
We've been running into the same problem.
Same sheriff?
No. It's,
Okay. Yeah, David?
So there is an office within the Attorney General's office that is a liaison between requesters and responders. They're pretty good about county and municipal situations. They will often intervene and kind of remind people what their responsibilities are, send letters, pretty good ones sometimes. The problem is that they've got a conflict of interest when it comes to state agencies, because they're the attorneys for those agencies as well as being presumably public attorneys. So they will sometimes talk to those agencies, but they will seldom get very aggressive with them.
Yeah, and we'll talk about them when it comes to appeals too. But they also really don't have any
Sometimes
teeth.
shake things loose with
Right?
counties and cities
Yeah.
that are.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'll probably have missed this when you was explaining, but in that record retention schedule, what kind of open records you said, like, we can find from this website?
All kinds, right? This is all of the records that an agency is required to keep. And different agencies have their own retention schedules. So this one for local governments, this is all the different categories and everything they're required to keep.
Okay.
So this is how you can know what's possible, like what they actually have, and what to call it, importantly. Yeah.
I just want to share one thing I found useful is ACCG, which is the state organization for counties, their counties association, has a here's how to comply with open meeting and open record laws that they give to counties. But I like using it because it really breaks down the law in a plain way. And then you can cite it to local governments like, well, according to your own organization, it says on page 182 that really is legal or that really is public. So
Yeah.
I just found it a very useful, easy to use guide that really breaks down the law. And you can use it, so it's not like, because sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, we're citing pro-media sources when we try to tell them what is and isn't public. Well, this is citing their own people.
Right. Yeah, that's a great resource. During the break, if you would help me find that, and I'll put a link in the presentation for everybody so you guys can have it. Yeah, that's a great resource. All right, so we're still looking for what's available here. We'll get to the requests and the appeals and all that later. So great. So that was kind of the online sleuthing, also Googling and looking for what's available, obviously. Sourcing, like getting to know the people is super important. And I know a lot of times if an agency is just in general really non-cooperative, they're gonna be non-cooperative with sourcing or record requests or anything. But when you're starting out with an agency, if you can, try to meet their records custodian and try to make friends with them if you can. Especially if you're going to be requesting from them often. And you will also need to know before you write the request, who keeps the records? Who is the records custodian? Each agency has one. By law, they have to have a specific person who is the records custodian, and you need to address your request to them. So you gotta do this homework beforehand to make sure it gets to them. You also want to know like how long they keep the records and in what format, so you can ask for them in that format. If they have everything electronically and you can get it on a USB or email to you, that's gonna be so much cheaper than them printing out paper. So you need to know if it's available like that, and you can ask for it like that. Now, also study the exemptions. This is kind of where you're gonna feel like your own attorney sometimes, but know what is possible to be exempted, yes?
Sorry, it was the last slide. I've run into once or twice the legal custodian, they're the only person who can pull it, and they go, oh, sorry, they're on vacation for like 2 weeks. And then I go, that can't be the only way. And then they say, oh yeah, crazy, like the backup person's also on vacation. I was like, so there's no one else in the whole agency who knows how to use a computer? And they're like, no. So is there any, like, any
Your
advice?
law actually very specifically says there has to be a records custodian, but them being out of the office cannot prevent this stuff from being processed. And so this is a point where I would go to that mediation office and keep track. I'm gonna make this point a lot probably, but keep track of every interaction that you have. Like if you have that in email, that's the kind of thing that you would want to take to them. Like you have that, or if it's a phone conversation, take notes of it so that you can use that in your argument. Because that's a very specific no-no. That's very convenient that everyone who can use a computer is out of the office. All right, so some of the exemptions here with your state, some of these are very common and most states have them. And some of it makes so much sense, like you can't get social security numbers or personal financial information, or like the credit card numbers, that a state agency uses, but you can sure get what they spend it on, right? So some of these are more gray areas, like Homeland Security. I put that in quotes because it's my least favorite one, I think. It's like they can claim security and like can't let the terrorists have this information on just about anything. So it's especially bad with the federal government after 9/11. They were hiding all of the databases on like dams and bridges, and it's like, do you think the terrorists need a database to know where the dams are? Like, they exist in the world. They know where the bridges are and where the dams are. It's just silly. But it's used fairly often. Trade secrets, same way. It's like, you can drive a truck through these kind of exemptions about, well, you can't get the bids, for public projects, or you can't get various kinds of information. Gun licenses also, I think sadly, are exempt, and there's these kind of broad topics here cover many different types of information. The law is very specific about what is exempted, so read through it and understand these exemptions. Now, I say know them and understand them, but even if you think information or some of it might be withheld, ask for it anyway. Ask for it anyway. I mean, the only thing that I usually say, you can redact this without any fight from me, is like social security numbers and credit card numbers and that kind of thing, but otherwise, ask for it anyway, and they have to tell you what exemption they are citing. They have to tell you. They can't just say, no, go away. They have to cite a very specific exemption, like the specific part of the law, and that gives you at least some ammo to try and appeal it or try to argue. And also, you never quite know when it might go to court or something. So you have to make them tell you what they're exempting and why. And sometimes you will get a partial response as well, even if you think, okay, a piece of this might be redacted, like they might black out something, but I might get something from this request. So try it anyway. And to complicate matters even more, there's a lot of other laws that also affect the openness of records. So like healthcare, education, police records, there's often other laws in the statutes that affect that. And so you might not be prepared and they'll be like, oh, that's under the health code, whatever, you know. But they have to still cite that. Right, any questions about finding out before you request like what's available and what you can ask for? That's all part of doing your homework and making sure you write a really good request.
Does the records custodian have to be a specific person? So, same sheriff's office. They have like a technical records custodian, but actually all the records are going through the communications director, and I suspect that he's withholding certain things. So there's somebody who's like technically the records custodian. I have to send all my emails to her, but like he's the one who's screening everything I get back. Is that legal?
I mean, so they have to designate one person who is the custodian, and that's probably that. But yes, so many times public information officers are involved. If they are, it's not illegal for them to be involved. But if they are in any way withholding information from you on purpose, that would be illegal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And how many people run into this where the PIO is like running interference on your request or just in general on your questions? Like probably all of us, right? It's terrible. A lot of my friends have left journalism and they're now public information officers, and I love them dearly, but their job is not to get us information. Their job is a lot of times to keep us from getting information. And some of it's sourcing going around them. I mean, if there's an agency that's just stonewalling you, like, some of these tips might not work. We've had whole conference sessions though on like how to go around the PIO and like find other sources. There's a couple ways. If they are the only agency that has the record, you're pretty stuck. But you try to kind of think a way around them as well. Like, is there just another agency? Like, do they report this stuff up to the state, and I can get it there? Or do they share this with someone else? Is there anywhere else I can go? Or has an academic collected all of this, and maybe they're more friendly to them, and then I can get it from them. It's tough. The PIO. Does anybody have any good tips about going around the PIOs?
I don't know if this is relevant to your sheriff question, and it's a very different context, but I used to have success if I could get police records going to a family member, which would have a greater right to request, like if their family was a victim of some crime. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if that works here.
I think it does, right? And the family has the rights to like crash reports and stuff that media doesn't have. I think I'm reading the law right in that way. Family. Anyone who can get the records more easily than you can.
I think that this is not like necessarily a solution in any way for every scenario, but the airport, the Atlanta airport, has had a policy where they would wait until like 5:30 p.m. on the third day to respond, which I think is illegal. But anyway, as a result, that's the whole kind of process that the records custodian would use. As such, in rare circumstances where I think that they might actually have an interest in getting us the records, I would basically like request it in the morning, just verbally, talking to the person, or even like emailing the person, but not as an official records request. And if they don't get it to me by the end of the day, then I'll put in the records request. Because it's like once it went into the whole records request process, then it would definitely be 3 days, even though that's illegal. But regardless, it's like if they didn't want to give me the records, they'd just be like, put in a records request. So it only works when there's some kind of incentive that they might have to get it to me.
Yeah, and also it depends on the relationship with your source. Like some sources might actually prefer that, and you can do the oral request here. So if you have a source that's like, just please don't do the official, written request, that could happen. That could work. You might talk with the people about how they prefer you to handle it. I would say though, if you have strong suspicions that an agency or a PIO or anyone there is not giving you all the information, that's when I would consult a lawyer. Like, that's a, like, police investigation type, I mean, and it's the police, I know, but that's a like actual illegal offense. So if you know that, I would definitely consult an attorney. Okay, so when we write our requests, our main goal here is building a pathway to yes. So thinking about every way they might possibly say no and trying to eliminate all of those. You're trying to not give them any excuses to deny a request on some kind of technicality, like, this wasn't clear, I don't know what Denise was talking about, or she gave this really overly broad time frame and it's burdensome. Those kinds of excuses can really trip you up. So the things to include to make sure you're being very specific, addressing it to the right record keeper so that they don't throw it in file 13, just the trash can. The scope of what you're looking for. So, looking for emails to or from Denise about this particular public works project, for example. You can give them keywords if they're trying to search, like the name of the project, any different keywords that might be used to talk about a project, like anything if they have to search through emails or search through databases, something that gives them something very specific to look for. This is where your homework comes in, right, of knowing what everything is called. The expected or appropriate format for the response. So if they have emails, ask for them electronically. I have seen cases where someone requested lots of information, the city wanted to charge them $15,000 a page, or $15,000, $1 a page. And then the requester would say, oh, can I just have those burned on a CD? This was a while back, burned on CD. It's like, oh yeah, that'll be $1. Because you're just paying for the CD now. So know what format they are kept in and how you can get them, and it can save you money, it can save you time. As far as data goes, there's a specific provision in your law and many other states where if it exists electronically, they have to give it to you that way. So if it's in an Excel sheet, they have to give it to you that way. Meaning they can't, well they do, but they're not supposed to make a PDF out of it or print out a database to give to you. In practice, and remember letter of the law and in practice, how many people get data in PDF or printed out on paper, literal paper? It used to happen to me all the time, even though I lived in a state with this provision as well. Something that you have to fight, I used to fight it all the time and I still never got what I wanted, so I know how that goes. A lot of times you need to actually convert it yourself. If anyone's interested in doing that, come see me. I would get a lot of databases actually physically printed on paper, and I bought a scanner to make databases. So knowing what format it's in, how you can receive it. If you're requesting data, also request in your first request all of the record layouts and documentation. What I mean by that is everything you need to understand the database. And think of anything else you would need to understand your documents too. Like if you're working on a story about police misconduct, for example, you might need all of the training manuals for police and all of their procedures. And just try to think about everything that gives your request context and get it in your first request right off the bat. Save yourself some time. You can also ask for a fee waiver. It's not an affirmative right here, but you can try it. It is at the federal level, you can get a fee waiver. And then also include your contact information and tell them you're open to talking to them. Like you want to be transparent, it's a two-way street. Please contact me if you have any questions. You can also try asking for expedited processing. If nothing else, it just lets them know the urgency of your request, especially if it's like a breaking news type of situation. This can be a shortcut. Now, it only happens sometimes, but has anyone ever FOIA'd the FOIAs?
Yeah.
Yeah? It's fun, isn't it?
It is fun.
So what I mean by that is every time you file an open records request, it is open. Anyone else can FOIA that request. And it's a great idea, actually, just on your beat, to get these pretty regularly. When I covered a city, I did it about every 3 or 4 months, just to see what everyone is asking for and see what's up. It's typically usually in a spreadsheet, and you can see what their request times are and who they're denying. The cool thing is, though, if someone else has asked for what you've asked for, you can go back to their request and just say, like, give me everything you gave Denise last September. And they already have it, and you know they've already thought about it, or they've already compiled everything. This is one, a lot of agencies have started putting them online too, which is kind of crappy because it's a chilling effect, right? That they're just like, if you request something, we're gonna tell everybody about it. But this one's for University of Oregon. And you can come in and see anybody's request. So you could be like, you see that they provided the records here, so you can be like, give me everything that you gave Ryan. All parking citations. University campus, parking is such a deal everywhere, right? And you know they've already done it, you know they have it and can get it quickly. Okay, we're gonna talk about that. So what does an actual request look like? I would say cite the law, write it on your letterhead. If you have an organizational letterhead, put it on there. You don't have to do any of this, but it lets them know that you know the law, like you have read it, you know how to cite it. Makes it look more serious. I also, do a lot of you guys email your requests? Is that how most of them like to receive that? That's cool, and you at least keep that paper trail. If I had an organization I knew it was gonna be a fight, I would actually mail it through certified mail, so that I got a receipt saying they actually received this, and I kept that. But for most things, you can put this in a letterhead and email it. And then I'm very specific. I want the employee salary database for the city of Atlanta for each of these years, including but not limited to all of these things. This is a data request. So these are all columns in the data. And it's just something I learned over time, that you have to list out everything that you know exists in the data, or they won't give it to you. And kind of the same thing with documents. You have to think about your wording, so you're not giving them wiggle room to get out of anything. And this salary database sounds very simple, but I learned over time, if you just say, give me a salary database, you get everything up until here. You don't get anything that makes them potentially look bad, like overtime payments, bonuses, stipends, extra compensation that they'll just withhold from you because you didn't ask for it. So the wording, including but not limited to, will really help you cover your bases as well with, I want everything. And I'll also give you guys, there's a link in here to a template for requests. But for this one, I know that in salary databases, they can often have social security numbers or ID numbers. So I just tell them, I'm not requesting that part, and I consent to redaction. But if you deny any other part of this request, please state the specific statute that you believe exempts the information. Include the record layout. I prefer to receive this in a text file or Excel file. So you tell them the exact format. And then I also, like, my newsroom had a limit of $50. That's what I was allowed to spend without getting approval. So that's what I put in my request. If this is going to be above $50, please contact me before you fulfill it. Questions about that wording? Yeah.
I have one question about requesting correspondence, like emails or
Yeah.
et cetera. I'm wondering what format they are searching for emails in. Like, is there some comprehensive database that they have of everybody's emails? Or do they have to ask each person to grant access and then search their emails? Or are they asking the person to search their emails? And what about for former employees? Do they have those archived each in like a separate file? Partly because I just want to know, like, when I'm requesting it, is it going to take like 800 hours and I'm not going to see the answers? Or is it going to take like 1 hour and I can put as many names and dates as I want?
Yeah. So I guess the answer is it depends on what kind of system they're using. I feel like most agencies these days use Microsoft Outlook. And it also depends on their record retention policy, to the part of your question about, like, what if they have, do they have former employees and how long do they keep them and how long can I ask for? That depends on their record retention schedule and how long they're supposed to keep emails. Like our governor in Texas, Rick Perry, he made his own email retention schedule 7 days after he got dinged for something. He's been in the news lately too, with some stuff. But, so that depends. They can kind of make that what goes along according to their policy. For Microsoft Outlook, gosh, because that thing changes all the time, but I think that there is a central like way they can search, I think. Does anyone know that for sure? Microsoft Outlook or other programs? I know with like, if they are based on Gmail, an administrator can search, and I think Outlook is the same way. Now, in practice, how do they actually do it? They might do it the way that they get to charge you the most money, because they can charge for staff time to search things. You know, it's a question I would kind of ask, see if you can find a source who will tell you how they actually fulfill that.
And do they
it
not
just
have a
depends.
system for deleting emails like in the government?
It depends. I mean, that's what the record retention schedule is for though, right? It's supposed to tell them, here's every record, here's how long you're supposed to keep it and what you do with it. Like you're supposed to destroy it after X amount of time or whatever the record is. And it's just, do they follow that policy? What is the policy and do they follow it? Those are great. Those are really great questions because it will vary by agency of how that all works.
Do you think that, like, if there is a record retention policy, do you think it has to be followed by each employee in their own, you know, Outlook thing? Or is it like that they have a system where you literally, you click delete and it does not delete it?
I mean, theoretically, they should all be educated on the policy and they should all follow it. I don't know if there's a way to be like, you cannot delete an email, like technology-wise. I mean, I see what you're getting at. Yes, can people delete their emails no matter what? Probably. Probably.
This sort of piggybacking, and I think you might have asked this, but something we found when we did an open records request to the EPD about this ethylene oxide issue, which has been a big issue in the state of the past couple of months, was that when somebody sent an open records request to EPD, they would send a request to their employees and say, check your email for any responsive documents. Well, if I'm an employee and I know I've done something wrong, I could just not turn those over.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the law about people not retrieving their own responsive documents or any kind of a conflict?
Well, it falls under, I don't think there's anything specifically about like employees shouldn't search their own documents, but it falls under that the agency is not being responsive, or like, because they're an employee of the agency, that's being willfully unresponsive.
Well, we don't know if they are or not.
You don't know. That's the problem.
Okay, so there's nothing that would prevent a state agency from reaching out to their own employees to say, send us whatever you think is responsive to this open records request?
No. That's probably a pretty normal way that it happens, actually. There's nothing that says they, doesn't get into like that kind of weeds about how they fulfill the request. Only that they have to be responsive. Yeah. Was there another question? No? Okay, all right. So, avoiding fees is a large issue, I know, in public records. Besides them just being completely non-responsive, which also happens. I feel like fees are one way that agencies are really stonewalling these days. Like they know that we are not going to pay. Sometimes we're not even pay $100, much less thousands. So you might get a response that says, "This is going to cost $1 gazillion. Do you want it? Yes or no?" You're like, "Well, I don't have $1 gazillion." The key here, though, is to ask for an itemized listing of what they're actually spending that money on. They can charge you money for the staff time it takes to put it together. You want to know who is working on your request. Like they would have to say like records clerk or attorney to review and make sure there's no redactions, and the hourly rate for those, the hourly estimate. They would have to list charges for copies, They would have to list if you're burning it on a CD or a USB or whatever, they have to list all of those costs. And one way to attack this is you can, in Georgia, it's an affirmative right of a requester to inspect records, in which they can't charge you for copies. So that would eliminate some of the paper costs. And you can take a scanner in there. These days, your phones have really good like PDF scanners on them. You can even just use your phone. You can make your own copies. So that's one way around the paper part of it. But like the staff costs of this and all of these other charges they can pile on, you have to really just get that estimate and then attack it in any way you can, because I've seen so many different situations that very creatively people got around these costs. I have seen, I mean, you just have to get that itemized list, because I have seen them try to charge, for a database, they try to charge $1 for every record in it, saying like, it's a record and I can charge $1 per record. It's like, just export the database and give it to me. That's like $30 for time tops, right? Can't charge me for every record. You just gotta know what they're trying to charge you for in detail. David, did you have some?
There's a provision in Georgia law that says that the hourly fees are for the lowest paid person qualified to do the work, so they can't charge a $500 an hour lawyer to go, look at the file or something, or whatever the work happens to be. That's if they're coming back to high. There are also a bunch of other provisions, like they can't charge for the time for the lawyer to determine whether a record is releasable or not. And lawyers don't have to do redactions either, in
that's great.
or something like that. So there are lots of places where you could, as you say, once you know who it is, you can say, is that the lowest qualified person?
Yeah. And this is where having a salary database comes in handy, right?
Right, and there's also, on the database, there's also provision in the law that they can't deny you, if it's in a database, they can't say, we don't have to create a record, like if you're asking for something that's in the database, they can say, well, that would be creating a record, and we don't have to do that. The law actually says that dumping data from a database into a file is not creating a record, it's just giving you a portion of the existing record.
Yeah. That's a really surprisingly common excuse that they give. It's not a new record, it's just giving me a copy of those records. Yeah. My favorite cost story that I will tell you guys is, this was in Texas. We did a whole investigation of cost of public records, which is another thing you guys can do. You can actually get copies of all of the fees that they are charging everyone. I mean, we saw our city charging an employee $800 to get her own personnel file. We saw really examples of the public not being able to get information. But there was a teacher, he was a professor at one of the local community colleges. He requested some information. They said that'll be $6,000. You have to pay a 50% deposit. And he did. And then when he got his request back, he requested all of the time cards of the people who worked on his request. Prove it to me that you actually spent $6,000 worth of time. Guess what he got? He got his money back. He got his whole deposit back. Because they couldn't prove it. They were making it all up. I just feel like that happens so often. So looking at those people who are working on your request, attacking it in whatever way you can. If you want to strategize about some of that, give us a call. It's one of my favorite things to do. So again, being as specific as possible with a request. This request I'm about to show you, one of my coworkers wrote this, and he did his homework so amazingly well that he was able to tell them this was a request for information about an investigation, and he was able to say, I want documents on, about, or mentioning this credit union, formerly of Omaha, Nebraska, or this person. Please include records from indices to the central record system called ELSUR and any cross-reference documents relevant to this request. Like, he told them what to look for and where to look, which is amazing, because he looked at all of their records and all of their systems and knew where to search for it. That is so good. So good. Now, can every request, can you do your homework that thoroughly? Sometimes you don't have time, sometimes there's not information available, or you don't have a source, but it is something to strive for. You can also study how attorneys word their requests, because it's quite fascinating. This is a request from the ACLU, which is a whole bunch of attorneys, and it's several pages long with the whole request, but this part right here where they talk about exactly what records is great. It's like, it's so specific. They cite the actual provision of the law that these records are kept under, everything, and there's several bullet points here too, which is another good strategy. If you have lots of records you want, bullet point them out. And then that helps you prioritize them, and you can kind of negotiate with the agency to say, I really, really want 1 and 2. We'll talk about timeline for the others later, but please try to get me these as soon as you can. We talked about this too, document, yeah.
Sorry. Do you, because there's, in my mind, two theories, like put everything in one big wish list, or do like a bunch of little requests so they can be coming in throughout and they can't be holding, because they say they get everything but one of the things on your list, and they're just holding all of it for months and months while they're looking for this one thing in the big list that you gave. So do you find it's better to do, like put it all out there, or annoy them with a bunch of little requests? You know what I mean, like breaking them into individuals?
Some of it might just depend on the person on the other end, but they should not be withholding something.
Yeah.
I mean, they shouldn't be.
Right.
But if you find that they are, maybe you're gonna have to break it into smaller requests and just be like, I'm sorry I have to bombard you, but I've had this experience in the past and I'm gonna do this. It's also good just to try to keep that communication open, instead of just sending a whole bunch of requests, like, just explain like why. Look, I've had this happen to me in the past. It wasn't even you guys, but I just wanna really cover all my bases. And they know that you're a human being and that you have your reasons. If you have a line of communication with them, I know some agencies don't really play ball like that, but yeah, I mean, there is two theories there, or two schools of thought, and it might depend on your situation, which one's better. So we talked a little bit about this, but tracking everything that you do, every conversation, every attempted phone call. If you have tried to call them 15 times about your request and they are not answering the phone, they're not calling you back, returning your voicemails, track it. If it does come to mediation or to the courts, your lawyer will thank you, or yourself if you're acting as your own. You can use a template to file requests. These are some organizations, Muckrock, iFOIA, that have templates and boilerplate language, and you can fill them out, they'll ship them off to the agency. Those do make, like Muckrock makes your request public. It's a community of FOIA people. Just be aware of that. My favorite is a spreadsheet, shocking, but a spreadsheet and calendar system is what I would use to track all of my requests. And this is a template right here for, it's a Google Doc, so you can keep track within your whole organization, even your whole newsroom. So everybody knows what they're working on, and you just track the date, which reporter requested it, the agency, the records custodian, their contact information, what you requested, and when a response is due. And then you can actually sort the spreadsheet and be like, oh, these things are overdue and I need to follow up with these people. You can make notes in it. It's a great way to keep yourself on track for following up. So yeah, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, we're in the following up phase now. Yeah.
Oh, so how do you know when a request is due? Is it just based on your own personal deadline, or is there?
No, that's where they have the 3 business days.
Oh, okay.
It's supposed to be in a reasonable amount of time.
Gotcha.
Right? But the law says a reasonable amount of time within 3 business days.
Okay, got
That's
it.
what it says. And they can also come back to you and say, well, this is in storage, or this is a huge request and I need more time, but they're supposed to tell you that within that amount of time, within 3 days. Any other questions about writing your request before we talk about following up? Or do you want to talk about the law?
Well, no, it's sort of a question about requests, but I don't know that there's actually an answer, but I guess I'll pose it. So we have a difficult time with schools. They always cite for when we know that there is video that's supposed to exist. School bus, you know, an incident, they always say, there's a school, or child involved, so we can't show it to you. Is there any way that we can request that information with their faces blurred, or is there anything that's worked for other reporters to have access to see them?
I mean, you can try, but video, like, that's essentially redacting information, redacting an identity from a video, which I don't know that they're required to do. I don't know, that'd be a great question for an attorney,
Yeah.
but you'd have to.
You just run into it a lot.
Yeah, I don't think they're really required to do that, especially if it, I mean, there's so many involved in it too, right? That's a great question. Okay, so after your request, following up is super key, and I know it's difficult sometimes to keep track and you have so many things going on and deadlines for other projects, but it's important to follow up on every request if you can. I think every time we kind of let something drop and let them get away with it, it teaches that person, like, oh, well, Denise is just gonna let this go. So a lot of reporters suggest just being an absolute pest. And I mean, in a nice way, but being persistent is key. Some reporters even set up emails every morning. You can automate emails, right? So just go to that person, hey, just checking up on my request, how's it going? And just not letting them ignore you. So if you we're gonna talk through some roadblocks now, and this is where I also wanna hear, we've been talking about them already, but any roadblocks that you guys have, some answers are just not satisfactory. But some we can get around. So if you get a denial or a redaction and no reference to why, they are absolutely required to, and there is a provision of your state law that says that, so you have to tell them that. That's the only way you know what they're thinking, so that you can attack their line of reasoning and say, well, this exemption doesn't really apply here because of X, Y, Z. All right, so why do you want this information? What's your angle? Has anyone ever heard that all the time? This is totally case by case. You are absolutely not required to tell them, though. You are not required. There have been many case opinions that say it is not their business. However, if you're building a relationship with that person, or if you have something that you can tell them that just kind of makes it look like you're being transparent, I mean, it's okay to tell them too, if you want to. It's case by case and however you want to handle it, but it's your choice, I guess is what I'm saying. It's up to you what you want to tell them. It is totally within your rights to say, like, bug off, you can't ask me that. It's irrelevant to this request. But sometimes in source building, it helps to actually give them a little something. And it also shows that you're being transparent with your methods. We're demanding transparency of them. So another one, we can't give you the data because our vendor software is proprietary. This happens all the time when asking for databases. Your response to that is, well, I'm not asking for your software. I'm asking for the data in it, right? There is actually a specific provision in Georgia that says they don't have to give you software, and it's like, you don't want it. It's like, fine, I just want the data in it. I can load it up into some other program. This is the old PDF problem. We only release data or documents or whatever as PDFs, so you can't tamper with it. Just to get that all the time. It's in the law that you have to give it to me as it exists. This is some language you can drop in there about getting data in electronic format. Oh, this is a good one. Have you heard this one? Yeah? Our database software can't export data. What happened in your case? Were they able to export it?
Oh, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Now, I have seen one case where this was true, and we had like 2 newspapers, IT departments working on it, and working with their IT, and it was some weird, crazy thing, and we weren't able to get data out of it. But 99.999% of the time you can. And yeah, and it's because that's how data systems are built. You gotta get information into it and out of it. So you can ask what software they're using. If they won't tell you, you can actually put in a public records request for what they're using. I've had to do that. And then you call that company and say, how do you export data? And I've had this happen to me, and the most egregious example was a courthouse, some courthouse records, and they're like, oh yeah, you can come down to the courthouse and you can look at it, but we only have it on this one computer, and like there's no way to get it off, blah, blah, blah. So we asked for what software they were using. Does anyone want to take a guess?
Microsoft Word.
Super close, Microsoft Access. Like, oh, I also have that software. Like, that is nowhere near proprietary. You don't even have to export it. You just save it as an Access file. I can open that. It was insane. Microsoft. Everyone has it. So they might try to hide things from you. I mean, sometimes maybe they really don't know, but sometimes they're just trying to be technical and scare you. And it's just total BS. All right, so this is this link here is a request that was actually a $1.4 million estimate. We've received $1 million estimates from federal agencies. And you just gotta get that itemized estimate and look at their process. Yeah, it's just, you just gotta find a way. Ask for it electronically, ask for it in a different format. Ask them what you can do. Sometimes it's even a matter of narrowing your requests. Maybe it's like, oh, my search was really large. What can I do to narrow this down? Any kind of negotiation like that. Or it's going to take like 8 million years to fulfill this. Has anyone ever gotten a ridiculous time estimate?
I've gotten like 3 years from a federal agency.
3 years. Hey, that's pretty good for a federal
Department of
agency.
Energy.
Yeah. They know you're a journalist and that you're on a deadline, and that if they can wait you out, sometimes you'll just go away and not pass your deadline. You don't need it anymore. You can try to negotiate and narrow and say, like, well, what part of this could you get me? Or is there anything I can do to help you? It's kind of that help me help you type of tactic. Is there any way that we can narrow this to get something sooner, or any piece of it sooner? This is the advice of many of the panels that we have done at our conference, and FOIA expert attorneys and reporters is always appeal. As we talked about, you don't have an exactly appeals process here in the state. I would say if you do federal requests, always appeal. For sure, there's a whole process there with OGIS. At the state level, you have this mediation office. There is a link there. And as David, you said that they're pretty good, right? The mediation office, or
Yeah,
pretty decent?
Yeah, they're very helpful. They try with just a whole county.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest problem with it is it's not really an administrative appeal, so it doesn't have a legal weight, right?
They don't. What they do is basically remind folks what their legal obligations are, but coming from the Attorney General's office, sometimes.
Yeah.
And the Attorney General's office has the authority, that's how they went after the folks pointed to in Atlanta. So we now have a precedent where the Attorney General's office has gone after the
Yeah,
So
which
they
is-
sent a letter, there's still not clearly violations of that.
I guess there's one positive thing then that came out of the,
Yeah,
Atlanta
well,
scandal.
no, I mean, I think it's actually sent a signal around the state. One thing to note though is that Georgia considers only written records have the power to time penalty. An oral request, sorry, only written request have the power of some kind of oral request.
Yeah. Good to know. So other ways though that you can fight back even outside of that process, transparency issues are newsworthy and sometimes very newsworthy. So you can actually write about it. If it's a smaller thing, you can tweet about it, give people some behind the scenes stories about it, but you can write whole big stories. If it's especially something of very high public interest and they're withholding documents, it's a huge issue. You can also try going up the chain of elected officials sometimes. Now, again, depends on the elected official, but sometimes because they are more accountable to the public, right? They have to answer directly to the voters. Sometimes they are more sensitive to this kind of thing, so they might help shake loose records for you. You can also request the processing notes of or the emails about your requests. Now, if you have an agency that's super uncooperative in the beginning, will they give you those emails? I don't know, I hope so, but it's a favorite tactic of a lot of reporters to find out what their mindset is about your request and what they're saying to each other about it. I also know a reporter who accidentally was CC'd on a bunch of emails about her request. It's fascinating. They were basically like, just make her go away.